Good Woche. Is the screen visible? Any indication? Yes, thank you. So welcome to tonight's shiur. It's dedicated by Reb Tzvi Mitz, Yortzeit for his father, Reb Yitzchok ben Shmuel Mitz, who passed away now it's been the 10th Yortzeit just this past week. So thank you, and anyone who wants to sponsor in the future, we're always happy to oblige. And want to know how much it is? This is £50 a shiur. All right, let's go into our shiur. First thing is a story. While I was in New York by the chinos, so someone saw me in the shul, and he says, "I have a story to tell you that Rabbi Chadakov would often call various shluchim, and including my father-in-law actually, and there could be quite long conversations." And this was actually with Rabbi Yisrael Shmotkin, a shliach in Milwaukee, which just now became a mechutin. His grandson got married to a great niece of mine, so I was able to verify the story with him, with his family. So it was once in the evening, sitting around the table for supper, and Rabbi Chadakov calls, and he asked Rabbi Shmotkin, "Do the children know the laws of brochos?" Okay, and he put them a question: "What brocha do you make when you eat rice?" And so the children said, "Two brochas, three brochas with a piece of mezainis, a piece of something else, the well-known thing." And Rabbi Chadakov was satisfied with that. So why did he tell me this story? Because in my siddur, I had written that since the Alter Rebbe says that the Yerei Shamayim should eat it during a meal, because there's a suffix where the Gemara, it says clearly that oires, the brocha on oires, is mezainis. The dilemma is whether what we have on the table is actually oires or is it doichan. Because of that dilemma, therefore the Alter Rebbe says Yerei Shamayim should eat it only during a Suda, and otherwise it seems to be you say shahakal. That's what the Alter Rebbe says. So I've taken that view that you don't do this shtick with two brochos or three brochos. And here, so not that this is conclusive, but that seems to be quite popular. A lot of people do this, making two brochos or three brochos. And okay, that was the story. Actually, in the new print of this siddur, if I remember correctly, I added that Rabbi Grona, Olav Shalom, Label Grona, also told me that he had heard from Chassidim about making the two or three brochos. Okay, so it's nothing new about that. So there's different ways of dealing with it. Either taking the Alter Rebbe very literally, Yerei Shamayim eats it only during a meal, or to say we'll do this bracha and that bracha. I'm sure you're curious what's the svara not to do that shtick. So my main argument there is that the purpose of you could say shahakal nir b'dvoroi for anything. And this you cover all the brachas. Shahakal nir b'dvoroi. So you've said that you acknowledge the idea that you're not allowed to benefit from this world without a bracha. That's true. We said shahakal. You can say shahakal when you smell besamim. You can say shahakal when you put on new clothes. It's all included in shahakal nir b'dvoroi. But then there's a mile of having specific shevach, specific praise. So therefore you have a special shevach miyuchad. This is pri hadama, this is pri ha'ez, this is hagofen, etc. There's a shevach miyuchad. My argument is that that when you have this rice in front of you, even if you do this, you have a piece of mezainis and you have a bit of vegetable, you still haven't made a bracha miyuchad on the rice because you still don't know what the bracha on the rice is. So you've said a bracha miyuchedes on the other two things, but you haven't gained the bracha miyuchedes on the rice. Okay, but fine. Meanwhile, since I sent this out on Friday morning, I got a request to address a related question, and that is about lentil cakes. Now, I want to share with you that there's something which has become popular in the last 30 years, possibly more, rice cakes. And the contemporary poskim generally take the view that the rice cakes are ha'adama, and they don't fall into this whole dilemma of is it mezainis or is it ha'adama or shahakal. The general consensus is the majorities is that it's ha'adama. Let me explain to you something. What brocho do you make in popcorn? You take corn, the seeds, these hard seeds, you put it into some specially made container or a pot with a bit of oil, and those seeds pop into this fluffy thing which we call popcorn. And the brocho is adoma. It's not as if it's been gone through a mincer or it's not been pureed. That is, it's so therefore the brocho remains adoma. Now, what happens? You take popcorn, and instead of loose popcorn, you pop them into a form, and they get stuck into a round shape or into a square shape, and it becomes now what we call a rice cake or similar. So it's the same thing. It's a hadama. So that's what the general view is, that you can see here. Just taken from one sefer, but many contemporaries try to say the same thing. Perichiot or chita v'orez, which means rice cakes or wheat cakes, yakaut cakes. That the gargarim, the grains are not cooked, but they are tofchim. They swell. They are blown up, and they get stuck to one another with heat. Das Rov HaPoskim, that the broch is hadama, because they are not called baked, they're not called cooked. Let's explain something. The reason why there's a svara to say why the Gemara says hadama, why the Gemara says oires is benzainus, is because although it's not from the 5 grains, chamishas min dogon, but there are entire populations which this is their staple food, and therefore oires is mezainis, fine. But that's true if it were in flour form or in the whole rice form, cooked rice. That's true. There are entire populations, this is their staple food. But when it's in the popped form, as in like popcorn, but in these rice cakes, that's not the derech habishul, it's not the derech of afiyah, and hence this is the majority view nowadays, that rice cakes are ha'adama. And this is for me relief. If you want to have a rice cake and you want to be the Alter Rebbe say Yerish Shamayim Mitzech HaSudas, the Alter Rebbe is talking about in the cooked form, etc. But if it's in this rice cakes, you can make hadoma and you're good. So the question which the person asked me was, what about lentil cakes? And so what you see on the screen, so that's actually a lentil cake rather than a rice cake, but there's no difference. It's the same principle. You've taken grains, in this case it's lentils, which have an outer husk, and probably because of the heat. So then the inside explodes out of the husk, and it becomes a food like this fluffy, crispy food, and it's all hadama. So they're all hadama. Right. Now, what bothered me then for years, and I just kind of looked it up tonight, is there a difference then with this and Rice Krispies? Is Rice Krispies the same as this rice cakes? So I looked at it again in the Sefer Sharia Brocha, and there you have on the screen puffed rice or Rice Krispies. So he explains how it's done, and he says that, well, according to the Mishnah Brura, on the Brocha on rice is very mezainis. And all right, although I mentioned the Alter Rebbe says the suffix because is what we have is the rice dogon is the rice oires or doichen. Mr. Brewer says just say bare minimum zonas. It might not be oires, it might be doichen, but with the eved yoyotze with mezonas, even if it's say mezonas on potatoes, says Mr. Brewer, you be yoyotze because it is after all it's a nourishing food. And therefore, it's not totally wrong. So that's the position of the Mishnah Berurah. We don't follow that. We follow the Alter Rebbe. And here, this Rabbi Stitzberg and Mashar Brocha goes further. There you see. So he knows about that. Or shahakal. So the same thing should be with petite oires. And the reason, what's the difference between Rice Krispies and rice cakes? So he explains in the footnote there that the process of Rice Krispies is they actually first cook the rice, and then it becomes edible food, and then they pop it somehow to make, or they somehow make it into the Rice Krispies, but it's gone first through a stage of cooking, which is quite interesting. I'm just now thinking now, if that's the case, it should be a question of having to be Bishul Yisrael, because yeah, this is where you have this business with the what they call these Pringles. I remember years ago, I came about 20 years ago, I came to Leeds for a Shabbos, and one of the kids asked me, what does something about Pringles? What brocho do you make on Pringles, or do Pringles have to be B'Shul Yisrael? I don't remember what it was, but it was important to them to know about Pringles. So what's the difference between Pringles and regular potato crisps, or what Americans call, what they call them in America? Potato chips, yeah. And the difference is that the Pringles is actually they've taken the potatoes and cooked them, and they become edible, and then they put them in this form, this special Pringle shape, and therefore once they become royal achila, says question of bishul akum. So really, if that's the case with the Rice Krispies, so it's all very well to say that Rice Krispies are not oila shulchan melochim. You wouldn't serve them at a banquet, but if they're going through an earlier stage where they are edible, then that raises a question of bishul akum. I don't know the answer to that. It's just come to my mind as I'm talking. Okay, let's go on to the next question. So the lentil cakes, we've said that they're hadomo, and the rice cakes are hadomo. The Rice Krispies is raised a couple of questions. Okay, let's move on. So someone comes over to me at the Chasna in New York, and he says that he's a shliach somewhere who sends out for people's birthdays. He sends them out a card wishing them a birthday and tells them something hogim about birthdays. What do you do about a person who's a Ger Tzedek? What do you do for their birthday? You've got a fellow in your community. Um, he's 40 years old. He was a guy 5 years ago. You can't send him a birthday card at your Mazel Tov on your 5th birthday. So so how do we deal with that? I was suggesting that write to him in celebration of the 5th anniversary of your joining the Jewish people, and but the questions are, when is his birthday, his or her birthday, and the other question is, what chapter of Tehilim, because in Chabad we have a minute to say Tehilim according to the age you are. So yeah. So Mistaver Loimar, this is a letter of the Rebbe, Mistaver Loimar, that the Yom Huledes, it's logical to say that the birthday of a Ger is the day that he was Begayer, since Chazal say, Shuhu Kakotan Shenoilad. It's like he was born, a child. Technically, what it means, he has no relatives, no brothers, no sisters, but taking that, extending that a bit further to say, all right, he's born then, and therefore that is he should celebrate that as his birthday. As I was thinking over the last few days, I was thinking about, someone may remind me, in Hayom Yom, there's talking, I think, about a chassid who would celebrate the day when he went into the Rebbe the first time. I think it was the Rashbats, and he would put on tefillin every year at the time when he went into the Tzemach Tzedek, but it was 5 a.m. or something, the first time he came to Lubavitch. I seem to remember it has something about Yom Haledes there, but I didn't check it out. Right. Now, so that's the Rebbe is saying to celebrate the birthday would be the day when they make Megayer. That's the birthday. Then what about the age? So here we have and this is from Siyam Shlichus, where we have an answer of the Rebbe to say to him according to the years since the Giyur. This was an answer to the late Mrs. Ruth Benjamin, who was lived in South Africa, Giyaris, and that was the Rebbe's answer to her, I believe, to several other people. So, right. Now, someone asked me, what about corn thins? And also, the answer is the same. They're also ha'adama, yes. The same thing. There's all this. It's the same method of them taking whole grains and popping them in a inside a form and creating the right. Now, next question is, can you call up some to the Torah, someone who's his saying a bracha is quite unintelligible. You can't hear what he's saying, you can't understand what he's saying. So this is also from the Siva Mr. Ashlichus, dealt with it years ago. The word for this kind of condition in Hebrew is called ileg. Ileg means a person who's unable to articulate words properly. So the example we have here is someone who suffered a stroke, Rahman al-Islam, and the speech is affected. So we have here a psak from Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. If someone who's not familiar with him is able to understand what he's saying, then he's considered a medaber. It's considered that he's able to speak. But if only the people who are very familiar with the person understands, then he's not sure whether that person is considered a medaber, which is this is a very difficult thing to paskin on, because basically this fellow, particular fellow, whether halachic comes up, young man about 35, to say he can never have aliyah Torah because he can't pronounce words properly. A difficult thing to say, but that's the psak which we have here. That if people can't understand what he's saying, so then he can't do a birchas haTorah berabim. He can do no, he can say he can daven. He does daven, but birchas haTorah is something which is done in public, so the public have to understand, be able to relate what you're saying. Right. Let's move on. Right. Now, as you may know, there is a minhag mentioned in Shulchan Aruch of not extinguishing the match when you light Shabbos candles. So here you have from Reish Samach Gimel, Alter Rebbe, there are others who say that once you've lit when you finish lighting your candles, so then you all of Shabbos, you become bound with Shabbos, and you're not allowed to do any malacha, unless you've stipulated otherwise. V'yal pizeh, there's a custom of Noshim, after they've said the brocha, and they've lit the candles, they throw the pesila to the ground, and they don't put it out. They don't extinguish the wick, the taper which they've used. They just drop it to the ground. And then the Alter Rebbe then he says, others disagree, but haminug hu kisvara shayin. The minhag is indeed like the first svara, that the woman who lights candles is mekabel Shabbos when as she's lit. And then he goes on with the details. She should daven mincha first. Of course, you may have noticed that the way the Alter Rebbe presents it is that the acha sheberchu v'hidlichu haneres. They made a brocha and then they lit the candles. Well, that's the Sfardi minhag. The Ashkenazi minhag is that the women first light and then say the brocha. On that basis, I have in the latest sefer Nesiv Halocho minhag that some wanted to say that this whole business doesn't apply to our minhag because the women say the brocha after lighting, so they only become a Shabbos with the brocha. I didn't agree with that, because the Alter Rebbe is not here to record minhag Sfardim. He's saying minhag his kesvara rishono. So therefore, this is sure many women are noyeg this way, that they don't put out the match, they just put it down. Once a woman is lighting several candles, usually, so they light, let's say, one with a match, and then they'll take one of those lit candles and light the rest, and then put down that last candle, or the first candle, whatever, they'll put that down, and they don't have to put out anything, because they put out the match before they've lit all the candles. Be that as it may, but we're going back to the quest. Here's the thing, that you light, let's say a girl who's lighting one candle, or a woman just lighting two candles, so she strikes a match, lights the two candles, what should she do with it? So we say, just put it down. Don't put it out, just put it down. Right. But so someone picked up on the diuk that it says in the Alter Rebbe's wording, hapesila. The thing which you are lighting the candle with is a pesila, is a wick, rather than a kisam, which would be the word for a match of sorts. Actually, before I go further, a couple of weeks ago in the Beis Haroah, someone called up about these, you've got these scepters, these long sticks, which you have like a little silver stick, and it's got inside a very thin shiva candle, and you light the candles, then you have to pull it back, and that puts out the flame. So was asking, can she do that after she's lit the candles? So I said, actually, according to this minhag, no, you wouldn't be allowed to, because pulling the candle back is extinguishing. There's a new chokhmah with a battery with some kind of laser thing that lights the candles. That's if it's something which you just take off your finger and the flame goes out, that's okay. That's no difference between dropping the flame to the ground or not pressing the button. But with these scepters, these sticks, apparently you have to pull it back, and therefore you are causing it to go out. And what I suggested to her is what I said just a few minutes ago, that she should light most of the candles with this long thing, and for the last one she puts it out, and then she lights this last candle from the other ones and puts it down, and she was happy with that. That would work with regular candles. If she's using these neironim, which are these stubby candles inside a glass, I understand that's going to be a bit more difficult to carry out. Okay, but coming back, so someone, as I say, picked up on the diuk of the pesilo, and he says, I got him sent me a whole several page email from some kind of research, that when you take a pesilo, if you take a wick and you put it on a flat surface, it will continue burning because there's lots of ventilation. But when you take a match and you put it down on a flat surface, then it will actually, because it doesn't have such circulation, and therefore it's going to go out quicker. So he was arguing that when people write these halachas in English, whatever, just drop the match. Well, actually putting down the match on a flat surface is going to be goyim that it should go out sooner. And therefore he's suggesting to put it down in let's say in a dish diagonally, in a way that it shouldn't go out automatically. It'll burn its way out. So interestingly, I sent this out, this question a few days ago on the Hebrew shiur, and someone sent to me just to be careful. Don't put the match in the actual candle, because sometimes that can cause a whole big fire, because people think it's just going to burn out. It can burn a long time together with the melted wax. But meanwhile, why am I sharing this with you? Here you have a Yerushalmi. It's Yerushalmi in Beya, the Perek Daled Halacha Aleph, and it's talking here about a piece of wood which is burning. Rabbi Bo b'Shem Rabbi Yehuda. Now in Yerushalmi, it doesn't use the word Omar. It's Yerushalmi speak much faster, and so why do you have to say Omar? Of course, Omar. Yeah, Rabbi Bo b'Shem Rabbi Yehuda. Bekas, a log which is burning. Soimchu lekoisel, you can put it near the wall. B'shvil shelo techasches, that it shouldn't keep on burning. So take a look in I think this is the Korban Edo, or one of them before Hashem. Bekas boy eres she'al hakira. You've got here a burning log. It's been on the stove. La'achashin istalka hakdeira, and you've taken away the pot. You don't need it to be burning anymore. You're not allowed to put it out directly. You'll put it right near the wall, that it will go out by itself. Because it means it shouldn't disintegrate, it shouldn't burn through. And I saw some contemporary before us saying that, yes, it's going to cause it to go out, to the fire to go out sooner. There's a rule in Yom Tov that gram kibu is mutter. So this very point which you're discussing, that taking a piece of wood and putting it near a flat surface which is which is fireproof, that's going to cause it to go out sooner. So we have this here in this Yerushalmi. Fine, let's move on. Just to share that inyan. Someone asked, what's the earliest time for Parashas HaTomid? Now this is an interesting question. It says in the Tur, it is in the Alter Rebbe says similar lashon, Parshas HaTomid lo yikra ad sheyeir hayoim. Shehi b'mkoim ha'krovas HaTomid she'ein zmanu ela b'yoim. Now in our Siddur, in Karbonis, we've got twice Vayedaber. The first one is Trumas Hadeshen, and there the Alter Rebbe adds, by the way, that wasn't in the first print. It was added by the Alter Rebbe in a later print. So that first Vayedaber of Trumas Hadeshen, the Alter Rebbe says you can say it even earlier, because the Trumas Hadeshen means that they would, in the Beis HaMikdash, they would take away some of the ash of yesterday's Karbonis, leftovers, and then that was the ready, getting the place ready, the Mizbeach ready for the new day's Karbonis. And so the Alter Rebbe says there, you can say it in winter, you get up even a reasonable hour, certainly if you get up very early, so it's way before dawn, and he says you can say Vayedaber. But what about Parshas HaTomid? There you have to wait Ad sheyeir hayoim. Now the word yeir hayoim, till the day becomes light, is a little bit ambiguous, because we've got various levels in the day becoming light. We've got dawn, alos hashachar, which means the blackness of light of the night has lifted. We've got then we've got ad shebechevrin, you can heir kol pnei hamizrach. Then you've got the sunrise. You've got various levels. So what does it mean by yeir hayom? And actually, in my siddur, I've been struggled with this, because before Hanoisen Asech Vivino, the Alter Rebbe mentions not to say it until Alos HaShachar, if you were up a whole night. When it comes to Birchas HaTorah, he says Ad sheyeir hayom. And so what does yeir hayom mean exactly? So in that's the context of Birchas HaTorah. B'kitzur, it's not clear. And saying a Parshas HaTomid is not such a dover chomor, and therefore the Piskei Teshuvos, he says it means alos hashachar, v'hainu alos hashachar. There are opinions that it means hei pnei mizrach, that the eastern side of the sky is already light, and that's later than alos hashachar. So he says, since b'diavad, if you said Parshas HaTomid by night, you also yotze. Therefore, you can rely on the opinion to say it from alos hashachar. Okay. So that's his psak, and I don't have strong grounds to argue. Since I mentioned this, I want to mention that in the Siddur by Birchas HaTorah, I made the following point. We have in the Haggadah, Ma'aser bo Talmidehem v'Omer Rabbi Seinu Gi Hazman Kriyash Mashal Shacharis. Now, what were the Rabbanim, the 5 Tanoim, what were they doing till then? They were saying Divrei Torah. They were talking about the Haggadah, Divrei Torah, and so they're saying Divrei Torah. And they said it's time for Kriyash Mashal Shacharis. What's the earliest for Shema? Not Alos HaShachar. The earliest for Shema is what? Is Mishiyakir. So when they came along, it was after Alos HaShachar. It was in Mishiyakir. And so they had been saying Divrei Torah after Alos HaShachar. So it looks like Mishayeir Hayoim maybe similar to Mishiyakir. And because we see that they were saying Divrei Torah after Alos HaShachar, without realizing that it was ready after Alos HaShachar. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so I mentioned that was at a wedding of a mishpocha, and when I was dealing with the paperwork, etc., with the atnoim, so unwittingly, I took my scarf and gave it to the. Let's go back. With it, when it comes to tnoim, there are several parties who are committing themselves. There's the Tzad HaChosen, the father of the Chosen, the father of the Kala. Then we've got God of Kablan. We've got 2 guarantors, so they also have to oblige themselves. And then slightly connected to the story is also the Chosen Kala themselves. They also like a little bit committed to the Chasna. Okay, so we do 6 kinyonim. And the way we do it is we give the various parties who are committing themselves to lift a cloth. This idea is what's called kinyan sudar, is a kind of kinyan chalifin. So the Torah, the Halocho allows a way of exchange. So I've got a cow and you've got a horse and we want to exchange. So when I do a kinyon on your horse, my cow becomes yours. You haven't even seen the cow. It's a different country. Doesn't matter. When I take from you your thing, so then my article now becomes yours. So now here we're not talking about cows and not horses. We've got here a chos and kala, and you've got the family, and they are committing themselves that in this and this, they will pay X amount of money. So what we do is we give them to lift the sudder. They are taking something, and in exchange they are committing. That's how this kinyan sudder works. So, as I say, we were doing the kinyonim, and I wasn't one of the witnesses. I just took my scarf and I gave it to one of them to lift, and then someone pointed out to me that the minig is actually to have the edim, to give the cloth. All right, so that's, I was curious afterwards, what's the difference? Who gives the cloth to the parties who are doing that commitment? So here you have in the Ramah, in Cheshen Mishpat Kuf Tzadik Hey, I spent some time looking around. So, well, it says in the first part, it's talking about the kinyan with a sail, and he says even if you give him a keli to lift, and you expect him to give it back, still the kinyan works. V'lochein says Ramah, hurgululas sois hakinyan besuda shel edim. It's common practice that one of the witnesses gives his cloth to the party making the commitment. I feel a bifnei hakoine, because yeah, all right, okay. So it says that it's done with the edim. It doesn't say why. It just says that that's the minig to have the edim do so. Then we have here, not mentioned on the page, the Aruch HaShulchan says it's one of the edim or one of the dayonim will give their cloth to the party making the commitment. Here you have Niti Gavriel, who writes the midin. It can be also the cloth of the Rov or someone else who gives it to the one who's making the thing. The minig is that to do it with the edim, that the edim give their cloth. And so he gives a explanation for this. Perhaps it's later on. If let's say the father of the kala, if he would lift up his own cloth, then he has achieved nothing. It's only when he gets someone else's cloth, then by exchange his commitment is bound by his commitment. So it's become the minhag to use dafka from the edim. Otherwise, there would be confusion. If the Bala Simcha themselves says, "Oh, take out his own cloth and lift it up," which is maybe good for Kiddush Levana to clear the moon, and the clouds to see the moon might work, but for Kinyan it doesn't work. You take out your own handkerchief and lift it, it's Dvarim B'Tehilim. So in order to avoid this Dvarim B'Tehilim, that the Kinyan should be done, so it's become the minhag to use that the Edim should give, one of the Edim should give their cloth. So I found that interesting to verify. Right, now we go on to the next question that someone was asking. They heard a shiur, and the one who gave the shiur, Viktam Chochem, and he said two things which were surprising for this lady. Number one, he had said that when you do haproshas chalo, you should do it as soon as you're finished making the dough. Making the dough means you take flour and water, mix them together, and then you have a dough, and then you leave it, and then it rises, and then you shape it into loaves and bake it in the oven. So she was surprised because she's used to being mafresh challah once the dough has risen. And this Robert said, the shiur, that you should do it right away as soon as the dough is ready. And the reason being is reason makdim el mitzvah. The second thing which you had said, that you shouldn't burn the dough until you've shaped the loaves. So we're going to go through both points. So the first point of waiting until whether you do it right away when the dough is finished, or you wait until the dough has risen. So this you can see from the Sefer HaTruma. The Sefer HaTruma is from one of the late Rishonim, and he says, before he was talking about Yom Tov, then he says, yeah, when you make the dough, you shouldn't take challah. Ein toiv lahapish challah ad la'achar sheni lo yishuk kechol hatzorich. You should wait until you've kneaded the dough properly. It's all ready to shape. Yesh mamtinin ad la'achar shenischamtzo. Now those who wait until it's become nischamtzo means it's risen. So they wait until it's risen. So what's the reason for this? Why should you delay hafroshas challah? Why should you not be reason magdim el mitzvah? He doesn't give a reason. So I saw in a sefer, contemporary sefer, who brings someone who says that when you want to give challah, you want to give a good quality piece, and therefore you wait until it's risen. It's more good quality. Which that sefer Chelkas Ben Yomin, he rejects that, and he says if the kohen would be enjoying it, so you wait till you give the kohen the nice quality. But here you're going to go to throw it into the fire. So why does it have to be good quality? So my suggestion is the following: that sometimes when you make a dough, sometimes the yeast which you're using is not effective. Perhaps you used the water was too hot, or perhaps too cold, or some other circumstances, and as a result, you make a dough and it doesn't rise. Now, what happens if you make a dough and you mafresh challah and it doesn't rise? So what's going to happen now? I think that it's a brocho levatala. It's if it's not going to be eaten, so then there's no mitzvah to be mafresh challah. And therefore, it's just a svara that you wait until you see the dough has risen, and therefore you have every reason to believe now that it's going to be a successful batch of dough, will bake well, and therefore you wait until then. Okay. At any rate, you see already in Rishonim there is a minhag of waiting. Yeshemanti, are those who have a minhag to wait until it's risen. So that's the first point. The second point was about when to burn the dough. So this lady who called me, she has a custom that she normally makes the dough on Thursday, then she puts it in the fridge. Then on Friday, she shapes them and bakes them. Now she's learning a new thing. You should only burn the dough, the piece of dough, only once you've shaped the challahs. That means she made the dough on Thursday, but she shouldn't be burning the piece of dough until Friday. So let's take a look here in Shulchan Aruch. This is where's the Shiur of Zion, somewhere around in Yeridea. When you take challah, well, the earliest is once you've made the flour and water, and make sure that there's no flour which is not mixed in well. Then he said, you should wait with the burning of the challah until the shaping of the loaves. And the reason for this is because when you are making loaves, it's common that you will scatter some flour on the table and you'll roll out the dough on with that flour. Now, the flour, which if you burn the challah on Thursday and on Friday you're taking flour and adding it to the dough, so then the challah is not covering the dough, the added flour. So so if you mafresh challah and you have in mind also the flour which you're going to add subsequently. But if you've already burnt the challah, it can't cover for the flour which is added. In a regular domestic situation, it's unlikely that the added flour would amount to a volume of a chiyuv challah. Unless in a larger situation, there could be, you can use perhaps a few pounds of flour. That's when it becomes a real concern. But that's what it says in the Shulchan Aruch at any rate, that you should, because you want to include in the mitzvah of challah also the flour which is added whilst shaping the loaves. Therefore, don't burn the challah until that has happened. Right, let's go on to the next thing, and that is someone sent me this picture of a menorah, and it's got 9 candle holders, but it's in a very slight curve, like a crescent shape, and very slight curve. So is that okay to use for a menorah? So here we have in Hilchos Chanukah, where we have about, in the Gemara it talks about if you took a dish and you put wicks around, you put a round bowl, and you filled it with oil, and you put wicks all around, and you lit the various wicks. So if if there's no lid on this dish, then the worry is that all these wicks will somehow, in the eyes of the viewer, will look like just one big torch, and therefore it's not valid. Therefore, following on from the round bowl situation being a problem, therefore there are more continues. You should be careful that the neiros, the lamps, should be beshove, beshura, beshove. They should be in a straight line, v'loy beigul, not in a circle. The have kimedura, which would then look like a bonfire of sorts. So fair enough. I still that there is to have the menorah just like in a circle, that the lights they're all all around. That is going to be a problem of Medura. I still think that this what we have on the screen, which is basically a straight run, it's slightly curved. I don't think there's any resemblance to Medura, and therefore I wouldn't say it's a problem. Right. What else do we have here? Okay. So then yesterday, on Friday, I'm contacted by a shliach somewhere in Russia, and he's already thinking about Asura B'Teves, and he's worried about getting a minyan. So he has a minyan, but he doesn't have a minyan of people who are fasting. It's amazing stuff which goes on there in Russia. They have these koilelim, where people are paid to come to learn, and bit by bit they're learning Torah, and they become Shomer Torah mitzvahs, each one at their level or their speed. But at the moment he has a minyan that helps with the minyan, these koilelim, but not necessarily are they ready to fast, especially if they're elderly. So here's the following halacha. Says the Shulchan Aruch that you can only say anenu in Chazoras Hashatz as an extra bracha, which means normally we have 19 brachas Shemona Esrei, and with anenu it's a 20th bracha. That would only be justified if there are 10 people davening in that who are fasting. Only if there's 10 people who are present who are fasting. And even if there are 10 people in town who are fasting, that doesn't help. You have to have the 10 people who are fasting in the shul. Now, not to be confused when it comes to, let's say, making up a minyan. If you've got 6 people davening, Shemona Esrei, oh, we've got a minyan, and you can have another 4 people who haven't davened or aren't davening, and they make up your minyan. But that doesn't work for Tanis. Tanis, there's a requirement that you have to have 10 people are fasting. Now that's in Hilchos Tanis, Tov Samach Vov. But this shliach came across in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch Simon Kuf Yotes. If there were not 10 fasters in the shul, and then after Rafa'enu, the 10th faster comes into the shul, then the Alter Rebbe says, okay, then the Chazan should incorporate the Anenu in Shemei Tefillah. Baruch Atah Hashem, well, Alam Yisrael Be'ez Tzoro V'Shemei Tefillah. So this was a bit of a surprise to him that you need to have 10 people are fasting. And so we have here from the Sefer HaMinhagim. And here is interesting that you have a difference in this respect between Kriyas HaTorah and Anenu. And let's read this carefully. The reading of Vayichal on the 4 fast days is if you have even just 3 people who are fasting. So you can do Kriyas HaTorah, and those 3 people will be given the aliyahs. Person's not fasting shouldn't be Torah. It doesn't add that, but I'm adding that. Anenu as a separate bracha on the Daled Simons, even if there are 3 people who are fasting, there's also 7 people who ate pochas mikashir. So he adds a new thing. So by the Kriyas Vayichal, Kriyas HaTorah, he doesn't talk about the 7 who ate pochas mikashir. But when it comes to Anenu, this is kind of in respect of the Shulchan Aruch, which says you need to have 10 people fasting. So this is based upon the Tshuva Tzemach Tzedek. And he says, okay, you've got 3 who are fasting, and another 7 who have eaten less than a shiur. So a little bit of history here. and that is that this is a letter of the Tzemach Tzedek to his son Reb Yisrael Noach, Hagon Reb Yisrael Noach, who was a Rov in Yezhin, Rov and Rebbe in Yezhin, and he was not of robust health, and it was a time there was a plague. I don't remember what exactly the plague was, but the Tzemach Tzedek writes to him, Chas v'sholem, he mustn't fast, on Tisha B'Av even. And in this part of this conversation is also about the Dalet Tzomis, about Kriyas Torah and Anenu. So it's talking about an Ashas Adchak, and most of the people would not be able to fast because fasting would make them more vulnerable to the illness, to the plague. Then he says, okay, so you've got 3 people who are fasting and 7 who are eating pochas mikashir, they are mitzaref. But if you have people who, they're not on the level that they're going to fast, they're not ready, then their commitment is not there, so they're not mitzaref as far as making up your minyan. I did say to him, if you want to say Anenu in a Shemei Tefillah, there's no question, because here's the whole thing is about saying an extra bracha. But if it's going to be together with Shemei Tefillah, that's less of a problem. Right. So going back to the previous question about using a round bowl and wicks around it, and if there is a lid, so the Shulchan Aruch said it is kosher. In Kofalei Kelly, then it would be kosher. That is minhadin. We didn't have the Gemara, but then we have the minhag as described by the Ramo, is that the one would just avoid this whole round menorah situation because it would resemble the Medura. Okay, what else do we have? So also this is the shtickle from Tzemach Tzedek, where you have talking about Vayachal, and then Anenu, he says, if you have to have 10, if there's no 10 who are actually fasting, then he says, if there's 3 are fasting, and Bevada Yiya Oid Shiva, who are eating Pochas and Kashir, so he's kind of relying on the 2 together. Right. Right. This is from the Siva Mr. Ashlichus, a lot of discussion about that. Fine. Let's go on. So I know I've passed the number 10 of your list, but we have another couple of minutes, so I want to share with you another shal which came up on Friday. So it's a half an hour before Shabbos, more, and someone's asking me, his wife has got an infected finger, could she soak it in salty water over Shabbos? And I looked up, and the answer is no. And let's read the first seif in Simon Chov Ches. Now it says, Alter Rebbe writes, a person's got a michush be'alma, who's got a minor, michush means irritation, there's no element of danger at all. The person is chazik v'holach kebar, they're functioning normally. Then on such a level, you wouldn't be allowed to use medication on Shabbos, even through a nochri, unless kind of details later might change. Even when there's no concern of melacha, not even with the rabbanon. And if it'd be a healthy person, that wouldn't be a problem. But this person is doing it for healing purposes, and it's evident is doing so for healing purposes. It's also, and that's because of Gezerah, the decree, in case one would come to grind the samamonim, the various herbs, etc. Therefore, if you'd be allowed to do medical stuff on Shabbos, people would be tempted to start actually grinding stuff. I once had a very strange shaila. Someone called me on Friday and says, I know you're not allowed to take medicines on Shabbos, but can I grind garlic for medicine, as a medicine? So that was the reason why the Xer is there in the first place. Just want to finish off. We have another couple of minutes, and so share with you a couple of stories from the Kinus Hashlochim. So we'll finish the shiur. That was just Lava Malka time, some stories. So I was at the Oyhel for Shabbos, and there was a shliach who spoke there, a shliach from Eretz Yisrael. So he tells the story of a fellow by the name of Oren. And Oren came to his shul on the night of Yom Kippur. And at the end of the davening, at the end of the davening, the shliach announced that Minhag Chabad is to say the whole of Tehilim on Yom Kippur night. So you're welcome to stay. And Oren was there, and then Oren went home. Oren did not turn up for Shacharis and Musaf. He came at Mincha. And so the shliach, Oren, so nice to see you. We missed you at the morning. He says, Oren says, well, I'll tell you what happened. I feel very bad that I came so late. But, you said it's the custom to say the whole of Tehillim. So I went home, because I can't read the Tehillim as fast as you guys. So I went home and I was saying Tehillim until 6 a.m. And then I lay down, and that's why I arrived so late. Can you give me some tikkun for my having missed Shacharis in shul? I feel so bad about it. So the shliach says, let's do a deal. You give me your Tehillim, and I'll give you my Shacharis and my Musaf and my Bavushanodav and everything. You can have all of that, and I'll have the schus of your Tehillim, which you did till 6 a.m. So this is how Oren is beginning to become more involved, and he starts coming to shiurim. Oren is 21 years old. He runs a pizza shop, and he one day is coming to shiurim, is taking things very seriously. And one day he says, the parnosa is not really working very well. Rabbi, could you come perhaps visit me at the pizza shop? And he comes, whatever they discuss, what this, that, what can he do? He's trying to be frum, and Hashem is giving him struggles with his parnosa. So the shliach says to him, Oren, you've come a long way, but that which you're living with a young lady, and without having had a chuppah, that's not okay. So he says, okay, but he says, I'll tell you, this young lady, she's a whole week, she's in an army base, she comes just for the weekends. Okay, I'm not worried about her. She'll agree to get married. My father's a problem. Who's heard in the secular society, getting married at 21 years old is absolutely not unheard of. So he's very worried what his father's reaction will be. And so the shliach suggests he writes a letter to the Rebbe. So Oren sits down and writes a letter to the Rebbe. As he's sitting and writing the letter, his phone buzzes, and he can see caller ID. It's his father on the phone. I didn't answer. Why didn't you answer? Well, I'm in the middle of writing to the Rebbe. I don't interrupt to answer the phone while I'm in the middle of writing to the Rebbe. This is Oren's hergation. After he finished writing, gets back. Now the father happens to be Oren's mother died a few years ago, and the father's living with a lady without chuppah v'kiddushin. But the father picks up the phone and says, Oren, the fact you're living with whatever her name is, Daphna, Zelo Beseder. It was like totally out of the blue. The father picks up the phone and says to him, it's not okay that you're married, you're living without a chuppah v'kiddushin, without proper marriage. So the father was the one who actually brought it up. Okay, well, he saw that it was helping him over there. Okay, so then okay, then what do you do until you manage to get the wedding? Well, they can't sleep together in the same house. So the whole week she's not there. She comes for the weekends. So Sunday morning, how was the weekend? So he says, well, Friday night I managed to sleep somewhere, in a friend. And what's the Shabbos? Well, I slept in my car. Now, Oren is a big husky guy, and the shliach says, but his car is a small car. So he has been sleeping in his car, just to keep the halacha. And so the shliach was amazed by his dedication. And so he says, I'm so inspired, I'm going to have to do some hachloto. So what are you going to do? So the shliach says, I'm going to upgrade my filter on my cell phone. Oh, is that a thing to do? Says Oren. Yeah, okay. So no problem. Oren says, I'm going to do that also. But how will you do Google? How will you do Uber? What? he says, I've got the shop, I've got a tablet in the pizza shop. I can do all my business there, but I don't need to have everything on my phone. A few weeks later, the shliach asks Oren, how are you managing with your phone? He says, no problem. No problem. You never have to call up for some support that they should take off that blocker and that block and that block. I didn't know there's any support. So he's just good with it. So then he decides, okay, they're going to get married. So appropriate day, we're going to make the wedding on Yud Aleph Nisan. So that was his plan. But then he realizes that actually, if you're running a pizza shop, a few days before Pesach, the pizza shops are very high demand. So it's not the right date to take off to make a chasana for himself. So he made it a week earlier, and then it comes just before Pesach, and the shliach says, Oren, it comes Pesach, there's no gibrox, there's no kidneys, and all the vegetables are peeled. He gives them the whole spiel. No problem. Pizza shop. So the pizza shop. Apparently you can get kosher LePesach pizza, a way of doing it, and got a good hechsher, and gave him a rough time to make sure that it's going to be taka kosher without any shilas. But I'm sure it's kidneys and whatever stuff. And so Oren stands the whole day in the shop selling pizza with a kosher Pesach pizza. And what do you? So he said, came at night, at the end of a long day, we came home, boiled some potatoes, and we had that for supper, and everything was fine. So this was the story of Oren. Just one more story. I see I have another a minute or two. Another story about a shliach. Oh well, some Haimish comes into a Chabad house in some remote place, and he noticed that one of the people who was in the shul he just saw him getting out of his car around the corner, and he was horrified that such a person comes to the shul, whatever, and so he wanted to take up his complaint with the shliach, but the shliach was busy, so he looks around, so the people are casually dressed, but then he saw one person, a kapota with the talis, with the long beard, and is sitting davening and focused on his siddur. So he saw this as the elder Chassidim. And goes over to him, asks him in Yiddish, in Shuldik. He said, I don't understand. I don't speak Yiddish. I only speak English. So he, in his probably in Borough Park Yiddish, English, he speaks to him and he says about this person who was parked around the corner. He says, so the fellow in the kapota and Langenbor says, actually 2 years ago I was doing the same thing. So so he realized his kasha was answered. And so this is another story which I heard. I'm sure it's happened many, many times, but just sharing with you some of these conversations which we had over the kinos, which is a very uplifting time, engaging and exchanging ideas with one another, and really kasher v'sachem gam yochad, and it's a geschmack to be there, and happy to share Grossman with you. With this, I'm going to wish you a good voch, and wish you to hear Besuras Teves, the Ike Besuras Hagula, Sachzeno Inein, Beshuv Cholitzim Berachamim.
Amen. Good voch.
Say something. Good voch.